Welcome to the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Bell, and I interview business leaders who are committed to their own growth and the development of everyone on their team. If you enjoy my podcast, be sure to subscribe and rate it on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back to another episode of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast. I want you to imagine for a moment that you are a female leader in a new position and you're getting ready to address a room full of your new colleagues, and they're all male. That's the situation my guest today has faced multiple times in her career, and you're going to love hearing her story, actually multiple stories. And along the way, you're going to find out how to introduce innovative ideas and get full support for them, because that's one of her superpowers. Her name is Jennifer Langton. Welcome to my show, Jenny. I'm so glad to have you with me today.
Thank you, Meredith, and thank you for the warm welcome.
You bet. And I want to also thank my good friend and fellow podcaster, Damon Limby, because he is the one that introduced us. And I'm so grateful to him that he did. Jenny is an award-winning strategic executive who's known for her ability to drive innovation and positive change. She was an executive with the NFL for 15 years, where she spearheaded initiatives that revolutionized sports safety, including the development of an AI platform to predict injuries, which impacted not only football, but all sports and several other industries. Prior to joining the NFL, Jenny served as Chief Financial Officer at Atari, and she's now focused on delivering keynote speeches and providing advisory services to companies. So, Jenny, I mentioned you being the only female in a group of males, and this started early on, back at, I think, age 13. So, would you take us back there and tell us a little bit about your start as an athlete?
Yeah, well, thank you, Meredith. Um, yes, at 13, there are values that I learned in breaking barriers, but really being authentic to myself as the only girl on that boys' team that had such a profound impact on who I became as a person, but also truly became the foundation of my leadership blueprint. And we'll get to that. So, starting back, my family was very athletic. And when I was 13 years old, I grew up on Long Island, New York, and I had such a vivid memory of this because I was inducted into Hall of Fame. And Meredith, I had to write my acceptance, right? And my appreciation to that association. And the 1 year that I played for that association, as I was writing the acceptance, I was just amazed with how profound and how vivid these memories were. And the first was me standing in my kitchen with my father holding up an incomplete roster. And he was making his case to my mother, not to me, that the Youth Sports Association for lacrosse that had just started, and it's a boys' sport, there was no girls lacrosse at that time. So I was used to soccer and basketball, and some of those were co-ed. But he was making his case to my mother that the Youth Sports Association needed one more player. So happened it was from my age group to play that season. And my mother said immediately, no, she'll get hurt. My father saw such potential in me. But again, unbeknownst to me at such a young age, that was not about me joining a team. It was truthfully me really learning who I was. So, what do I mean by that? I started on this all boys lacrosse team, and I'd have to wear the bulky helmet and the shoulder pads. And every time I took the field, I really think that I was amazed that there were no girls. I was always like looking for an element of pink, but it was all boys, and that was the first time. So I thought needed to start to blend in, and I'd hide in the helmet, in the shoulder pads so that I wouldn't identify as the only girl. Then my confidence really started to build when every assist, every ground ball, but every goal, I was not just as good, but perhaps better than some of them. And that was pure play. It was very much my talent and who I was. Again, I come from an athletic family. And so at first, I was a bit fearful that they wouldn't accept me. So I just played and I played it out. Then there was always the looming possibility of getting hit. And this was breaking barriers and really creating the change for me. I got leveled in our second game. And that hit knocked the wind out of me. I was laying on the floor. The ref came running over. And when I say, Meredith, I was writing my acceptance, I can still vividly remember the ref standing over me and asking me as they do their safety checks to remove my jersey and to remove my equipment. And I was thinking, there is no way I am moving my equipment and my jersey in front of all of these boys. So I screamed, I'm a girl. Please don't make me do that here. And it was just that me being real and me being authentic and connected. And this young kid came running over to me who I just assisted for a goal. He came running over and he goes, wow, that was a hard hit. Are you okay? And it was like, wow, okay, he sees me. It didn't matter if I was a girl. And that really started to break down the barriers and have all of those other teammates accept me for who I was. So, although I was trying to hide it, they were respecting that I was playing and that I was their teammate. I wasn't trying to be like one of the boys. I was just playing my own heart out. So that was really my first lesson. Now, after that, I will never forget this. My Aunt Susie, excuse me, my Aunt Sally had called me and she wanted to make sure I was okay. Why? Because my mom had told her, and she did not believe that girls should play sports. And she absolutely loved pink. So I told her, you know what? Girls can do both. They really respect me. And I wore pink every time I took the field, every time, just to show my identity because I felt very accepted by them. And at such a young age, that was always the foundation of my leadership ahead. If you're not authentic and you don't connect authentically with people, they're not going to trust you. And that's the foundation of building trust and really growing teams and accelerating with wins at work. And I was fortunate that I had that at such a young age. But then here, just to finish out that 13-year-old experience, it was the last game of that season. So looking out as we pulled up to the Hempstead field, um, I had seen that the players were 5 times my size, and I'd already been told that that team was going to be very aggressive. So this was the first time the entire season that I checked to make sure I wasn't wearing anything pink. I put on my helmet and I tucked in my ponytail. I had never done that. I'd always had my ponytail hanging out of the helmet. And so I didn't start the game, but when I took the field, I really let all my play do all the talking. And when I say that, I was the high scorer. I scored the winning goal. And after it was the high five, we beat the undefeated team. And you imagine just the, team and the team camaraderie and the respect from the teammates that I had. And after the good game line, I walked right back to the bus. I just wanted to get off that field. I walked right back to the bus. I sat in the same. When I took off my helmet, I looked out the window and I saw three Hempstead players, one pointing up to me. And he said, I told you it was a girl. And the look on his face was a mix of like respect for me, but fusion that they were trying to solve for it like it could be a girl. But I felt so proud. And at that time, I realized something very powerful. Trust your instincts. I didn't want to take an unfair hit. I didn't want to recognize at that time as an outsider. I wanted to play my heart out, which is what I did. And that was a real lesson that even in business and life today, I often use. I now call it strategic visibility, where it's reading a room. So you said, did I get in front of multiple different rooms, where I was the only woman? Yeah, it's the same environment. I was still the outsider. But the lesson for me and those early lessons from that experience was navigating how to be the outsider and still being true to yourself.
Mm.
Because if you connect authentically with individuals and within a team, especially as a leader, that builds trust and that fosters collaboration and success. And so vital to my leadership model, but everything that I approach in life is how you can authentically connect with people to build trust. And those are the foundation from then. And look, I was only 13, but look at what an experience that was for me that really proved to serve as such an impactful lesson, right? That I've carried through my life.
I love that story, Jenny. And I would like to, as we think about what you just shared, ask my listeners to pause and think about experiences they've had in their own lives that have shaped, either consciously or unconsciously, their own leadership style, just so we're more intentional about bringing our true selves, as you say, to the role of leadership that we're in, because it's clear to me that you did that. And then if we fast forward some years into college, you had two significant events that happened in the same year that impacted you also going forward.
I sure did. In my second year, well, just to complete that continuum, when girls lacrosse first became available, I was in junior high school. In high school, I became a four-time All-American, and I was recruited onto the national championship team. So as you could imagine, it was very much my identity being an athlete, but also my academics. I really did thrive academically as well. And so I was very much a scholar athlete. I was recruited onto the national championship team at the University of Virginia and so excited. Thank gosh, I played my first year, which was rare to join a national championship team and play through your first year. We advanced to the final four. So you'd think everything was like absolutely perfect. I was rewarded. My mother had been sick with cancer that first year. So the grounding and the support and the nurturing that I had gotten from my coaches and my teammates was just exceptional. And of course, you feel these things in hindsight. People ask, "How did you get through that time?" And I'm like, because the people that surrounded me, which also very much Meredith plays into my leadership style. What I needed then, I play forward. And so my second year, I had both lost my mom to cancer and I had a career-ending knee injury. And, look, that is never easy, but I went from always in the paper, Jennifer Langton with 6 goals, 2 assists to now a medical red shirt. And, it's very much my coach. I will never forget this quote. She was interviewed and she had said, I think it was just two huge blows that Jennifer endured that from as an athlete, she never fully recovered from, but she more than recovered from as a person. And at that time, what I needed around me, as I said, I really played forward from my leadership style. It was like one very bad collision, complete full reconstructive surgery, months of rehabilitation where I had so many people supporting me. And at that time, I learned what athletes really endure, and also how I needed to repair and reshape my own identity. And so that was at such again, a young age. That was very much my, continuous growth. Where am I now? And how am I going to go? Which really did create my leadership style. I call it CTG, connect, trust, grow. How you authentically connect, how you empower like self-trust, but also trust in one another, and then continuous growth. How do you grow? So you'll hear in my story, I took what was such adversity in blowing out my knee and having to change my athletic career identity and parlay that into my next challenges, my next endeavors. But years later at the NFL, I asked if I could join and start the health and safety department so that I could help prevent or mitigate injuries happening to the world's most elite athletes like it had me. I didn't want them to suffer what I had gone through, and I had experienced it. So I really did take my adversity and my passion, and created that a purpose at a time that I'd scaled in my career. And that's really, Meredith, where my transformation in work and leadership, that was really the height of it where I thrived. And if one can do that for all of your listeners, if you can really tune in to your passion and align that not just with what you want to do, but with your organization's needs, which people don't get that important point. It's not just about me, but if you can tie your passion to an organizational need, that's transformation, that's success. And
Hmm.
that's what I did. And I had the opportunity to lead then, health and safety as well as build the digital athlete and many other things. And it was quite rewarding.
Let's talk about what was the crisis the NFL was dealing with at that time where you saw the ability to bring in your unique strengths to help them solve this major problem that they had.
Yeah, well, I started at the NFL in 2009, and I came in as, I was a former CFO at Atari. And so I came in to help them to restructure the apparel strategy, bringing Nike on field. It was one of the best deals and experiences going to market and doing bids. That was just, I mean, talk about experience, exposure, but it's like I learned the power of the NFL on what they attract and how they conduct business. And so we brought Nike on. We grew the business, Meredith, 220%. It was my first $1 billion apparel portfolio that I helped to build. And I was the finance lead on it, reporting to others. But we brought Nike and New Era on the field. So I was like, wow. I mean, if you want to talk about making an impact, the NFL is the way to go. So I went to business school for 2 years. I did an executive MBA. And when I was done, I was very ready for a change. And at that time, your question was what was happening at the NFL was that was 2014. And, I created this roadmap request for a change after business school. I called it the Langton roadmap. And exactly what I had shared with you, tying my purpose, right, with support, data that supported the work that I did and why I had the leadership abilities to take this next step for health and safety, personalizing it, right? Being authentic at it so that they can trust me. But they responded to my request. They created an entirely new department, and I was named the first vice president of player health and safety. And I was working directly with a brilliant attorney and lobbyist from our DC office. And so we were partners in this exchange. But at the time, the league was under unprecedented scrutiny. I mean, there was the League of Denial that the press was calling us. The concussion movie was coming out. Congress was holding hearings about the safety of athletes and our sport and mothers and the pipeline of athletes, right, were resisting playing because of this unprecedented scrutiny around concussion in the NFL. And so what many saw as a crisis, I really saw as an opportunity for growth. And my background as I started in my career was very much more emerging technologies and how I can take emerging technologies and restructure companies. So I saw this as there's so much data in video, there's so much data about the game. How can we use data to better understand, right, what happens on field to mitigate and prevent for those injuries to happen? And so we started this department, and with my passion and with the brilliance of the experts that the NFL attracts, again, as you open, many times I was the only woman in the sea of equipment managers, of a sea of sports scientists, of a sea, not just woman. I was more commonly than not the only finance business lead with biomechanical engineers, scientists, medical engineers. And I was the strategist and the leader for the work, really keeping that engine moving. But I didn't focus on what I wasn't or what I didn't have. I focused on what I did. And it really did go back to my leadership style. If I could connect authentically and show them my passion and learn, I mean, I didn't need to have, which was a key lesson for me. And I would say this for the larger audience. You don't have to, you get into these C-suite positions and you're growing in your career, learn that you don't have to have all the answers, right? ensure that what I did was ask the questions and bring a different perspective because the NFL is such a powerhouse. We had world-renowned experts that wouldn't ask questions about each other and in front of each other, right? And they never worked together before. So we had a mission and a goal, and I was aligned to that vision and bringing everybody together. But I can ask those questions. I can share data. I can sort of move them, which was my leadership. If I authentically connected and they trusted me, then they trusted in one another. And that's really when we flourished. So it was connecting authentically with numerous of the disciplines. And I can go through so many examples for you, Meredith. But connecting authentically, you don't have to have all the answers. They have the answers. Have them do the scientific debates. Have them right now in this data science world and in this AI world. Let them have the debates, the experts. There are data scientists, data engineers, etc. Let them have the debates, get consensus, and move on. I didn't have to. I had to run the process. I had to build the relationship so I could lead. And once you built the trust being in me, but also in the data, because data is powerful in making change, right? And making impact, then that was the continuous growth. You take quick wins and it was the result of it. But if you think if you can't connect, then you can't build trust. And if you don't have trust, you're not going to have growth and quick wins. So
Mhm.
what was the values, and I really mean this, what was the values that I learned in playing sports, but also being a CFO on those checkpoints? You didn't have to know everything about every business, but you had to ensure that you understood enough so that you were collaborating with the different units, right? So that
Mm.
you were aligned to your mission and your vision. So I would say sports as well as the finance background that I had really did previously in my early years shape me for this role where it was just, and when I say just, it was much more high stakes. But most important, it was me being authentic to myself.
You know, what you're saying, Jenny, it makes me think about as people rise up into various leadership roles, the ability to zoom out and look at the big picture and look at the various players and how they are interconnected
Yeah,
to be able to form those relationships. If you're down in the weeds trying to find out all the answers yourself, you're not able to have the perspective that you did
correct.
and then be able to form those connections. Talk a little bit about how how did you build trust? What were some of the things that you specifically did with these various subject matter experts to form a good relationship with them yourself, but then also help them work together in a cooperative way so you got the solution, the answers, the um, end result that you were looking for?
Yeah. One of the when I was I had decided after 15 years to leave the NFL, which because I really wanted to consult individuals and companies to make an impact. Like what we built there was tremendous. I also left on a high when concussions hit historic lows. So it was like, okay, I'm ready for my next challenge. And I love the speaking engagements to share my wisdom and impact. There is a gentleman, Dr. Barry Myers, and he ran our innovation challenges from Duke University. And when I was leaving, he had said to me, "You know what your superhuman power is?" And I said, "No, Barry, tell me." And I, I worked with a lot of very smart people. He's a genius. He said, "It was your dedication and your commitment with me to learn and understand that I knew you were committed to it. But I was committed to it in that he said, you wanted me to be successful. And so I knew I could trust you." So a bit
Mm.
of that, Meredith, is one, I had a job to accomplish on behalf of the league. And it was always for the players and the impact of a player. That was me. So there was passion there, right? And it was like it was coming from, a very genuine place for me, my passion for that. But then to work together as a team, I don't see it any differently than knowing your team. And when you know your team, you know the pros and cons of every player. You know when somebody is going to be on the fast break or this. You understand people's strengths and weaknesses and understanding on how to know those, but then connecting to what their needs are was really my superpower on how I could connect. So with Barry as well as others, it was really time and more than just time, listening and understanding not what my needs were, what their needs were, because I was the connector. And a lot of times I'd get on calls and it was like, many times, and bosses, I won't, it's all about them, what they need. That's not how, yes, that is important. But it's like I'm more of a operations and I'm very much more of a leader that is fosters collaboration. What do you need from me to drive the work? And it's a different approach, right? You don't start with I, you start with
Hmm.
we, and how
Hmm.
can we do this? And I is a very significant role in it. But even going in and asking for, whether it was my job change, whether it was for the apparel deal that I had done, I was at Viacom and I had done a financial implementation, follow me here, for 39 broadcasting stations. And I'm going to date myself, Meredith. And when we had done that, I used a Microsoft product. The company, being the 39 broadcasting stations, took weeks to close the books. After a financial consolidation, it took days. So Microsoft was impressed with the quality of the work we had done as a team. I was leading it, but we as a team. And they asked me if I would pilot the SharePoint portal product. It was a website. It was the first website. I mean, we are dating back to that was sort of mid 2000s. And so I had to work with the CEO and CFO to do a customized metrics dashboard with them. And I realized at that point, talk about a lesson learned. They didn't trust the dashboard and the results, but they trusted me. And when I went to work with them, it's like, okay, well, what are you looking to see and why don't you trust it? I would meet with them for 2 weeks straight where they do their manual calcs and we would compare it. And then you realize, okay, they trust me because I've just done a build and now we're doing this. But what I needed them to do was trust in the system because it was automate their work.
Hmm.
After 2 weeks, when they could trust in it, then I could back off. That's a key learning. People will trust you before they trust the technology. So fast forward when I joined the NFL and we started this big apparel strategy, it was like work I was so proud in my career to be a part of. I was a part of this team where you have the heads of Nike and New Era and, Under Armour all coming to bid on the NFL's business. And I was at a company, Meredith, that was restructuring. So I was like, wow. And we were going to send out an RFP, a request for proposal, so they could do bids, right, on product by distribution channel. And it was pretty complex. And it was a hard book that we were going to send out. And so I went into, at that time, the executive vice president, Eric Grubman, who was wonderful. And I asked him, what if we, but I explained to him what my experience was. I said, when I was at Viacom, I built a dashboard for the executives. What if we build a dashboard so we could have real-time bidding as well as reporting? Because it will expedite all of the work to negotiations. And it was, I never said I explained that I had experience doing, but what if we? And so I had to do the checks, with legal and this one, just to make sure that we could do it with IT. And over the weekend, I built this digital dashboard and it moved me into the boardrooms. And so if you don't ask, you don't get, but you see in that example, that was not I. I needed a full team to be able to do that and say, okay, this is what I've done. Can we do this? And who do I need to do it there?
There's just so many things we can unpack just in these individual stories that you're sharing, Jenny. There's, just this theme here of your ability to see what's needed that no one else may have seen yet based on your own background and experiences.
Right.
And so the lessons for my listeners are think back to what experiences you've had that perhaps you haven't given yourself adequate credit for that you could draw from in bringing new ideas, bringing innovation into your organization, because that's one of the things you're known for. In addition to the superpower that Barry identified, which I think is brilliant, let me pause there for a moment and just reinforce how important that is
Thank you.
to communicate with someone through your listening, through your questions, through your learning what is important to them, and how he felt elevated by you
Right.
because of the interest you took
And look,
in
I
him.
don't have his engineering, his scientific
Right.
background at all. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what a team is, and that's how you foster a team. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
plays a role. And just as you're saying, and for many listeners out there, and I say this in my many of my talks, but more specifically to women, find your voice. But when you find your voice, remember that you have, as you're saying, I have a series of use cases that if I tap into those series of use cases, why not share an idea and make it ours? And if it's decline, at least they know you're thinking in different ways. But if you don't ask, you don't get. And that is such a big premise of mine. It's such a defining principle, but you have to ask in the right way. If you align it to organizations' needs, and a lot of time, if it's not and it's we and how it impacts the business, that is so key for every leader, but also people that are in more junior ranks that want to, like, they want to evolve. And so think about it as you're saying, think about what those use cases potentially are and talk to other people about them before you go present it. Like I never, Meredith, would go and present to internally in a boardroom or to commissioner or people without my lead engineer vetting my presentation because I wanted to make sure I understood the core concepts. I was so vulnerable with him, like, okay, this is what I would say, please help me because I do not want to go in there sounding like I don't know what I'm doing or an idiot. And it's complex work. But that time that I spent with him, he knew that he had full trust in me. I was delivering upon the work, and it was like, and he was polishing my messaging, my understanding, but that's building a partnership together. But it was rare that I would present internally back to the league office on such complexity of work if I didn't vet it with people. So think about that too. You have an idea, vet it with people. Most people would say to me, Meredith, but they'll take my idea. No, they won't. There's ways to be strategic around that or invite somebody to come and present with you then, and so, but it works. It's worked for me.
Well, and then kind of moving back to the point I was making about innovation, when you want to introduce a new idea, it seems to me you've learned how to um, I'll say, roll with resistance that's going to come up. You don't allow it to deter you or see it as an obstacle. It seems like going back to what you said, the crisis you saw as an opportunity.
Oh,
When you start experiencing resistance, because leaders deal with this all the time, there's something either at the company wide level that needs to be implemented that they're being asked to help get support for and roll out, or they have an idea that they want to get out, but they're finding they have resistance. What are some things you've done to bring people in so it becomes collaborative?
great question. So, it depends on what type of resistance that you're getting. So there's two different, I'll give you more of an internal example and then an external on, resistance, but really making collaboration happen with expertise that we didn't even have, right? So how do you approach something that is this, for me, it was this vision, is that even impossible? And I'll explain what that is because we need a whole new set of superpowers to get that done. But first and foremost, if there is resistance, if I was presenting, right, we had a health and safety committee that was comprised of owners, and this is what I had seen at first to everybody. I watched my bosses to see who was most successful and why. And the ones that were most successful had spoken to all of the owners on that committee and briefed them who are my allies, but who are more resistant to it. So when you go into that meeting, you're prepared for it. It sounds like it sounds so simple, it's time consuming, but it is so important because you can either prep that individuals that's resistance or try to get them over the goal line and then have others that are your allies speak to them. But that's how you start to move things. And that's with honesty and openness. But before you get into a room where you're asking for approval, for me, for $60 million or something that was data for players and data privacy was such an important hurdle, you better believe you're going to better understand what your positioning should be and how it should be presented if you know what everybody's opinion in that room is. It makes sense. It's just the type of important work that you need to do when you know there's going to be resistance.
Hmm.
Your allies to help you to break down that resistance,
Hmm.
right? Or take it on with yourself and ask those individuals why and how could you help to convert them over. It's like people want to be heard a lot of times. They want, or they might not understand what it is you're doing, so they're resistant. And that's where you need allies and others. But if you don't form consensus and you don't get the understanding of those that are the decision makers, then you're not setting yourself up for success. So that is like key number one. And again, I learned that. I mean, 15 years at the NFL, I will say, were very meaningful in conducting business. And the large share of times, ask to follow your boss or your leader. Understand those dynamics of what's going on in those boardrooms where you're not there yet, and it will polish your skills, right? To how people move, how people gain consensus, how people get approval on things, how people prepare. It's like osmosis for some, but for others that need to learn, shadow people that really do it well. And you'll start to form, your own um, your own abilities and your own skill set to be able to do that, especially when you're growing up the C-suite ladder. The other is, I would say data and expertise. And what I mean by this is, so we had great success, and we haven't spoken much about the core of the work, but we, going back to like 2009, or excuse me, 2015, um, after I was in health and safety, we created what we called the engineering roadmap, $60 million. I'm going to give you a very high level. And that was to better understand how concussions happen on our field and help to stimulate the helmet marketplace because helmets had been stagnant for so many years. So we have biomechanical engineers, world-renowned Dr. Jeff Crandall, that tested every helmet in his laboratory under the conditions for which those impacts, the speeds, the velocities of impacts happen on our field. And so we could test what helmets would withstand. Easier said, we could test the helmet performance on what withstood and what didn't impacts. And when your market is stagnant, what we were doing was collecting the data, and with that data, we were able to inform many different stakeholders to help us to solve for how we understand concussions, but then how we stimulate the helmet marketplace to reduce the impacts to mitigate those injuries from happening. And we had such rich data, me and my finance background and emerging technologies, it was all manual and so laborious. So helmets were tested. Meredith, we used to count the number of head impacts on field with human eye. NFL technicians took 4 days to count the number of head impacts in a game.
Mm.
Now, me, I'm like, well, there's systems. I built financial systems, dashboards. There's systems and new technologies that can do that. Here is an example. You think they're going to believe me if I go in and say, let's do? No, you have to then start to build. So I asked after we had success with the engineering roadmap, success was we started to have such rich data about head and head impacts on our fields that we could give them to helmet manufacturers so that they can build for better helmets. We ran innovation challenges where others could stimulate on new designs. So there's a soft shell called the Guardian Cap that came from those innovation challenges that are on field, very effective for mitigating impact. But then we also started to understand about the game, what behaviors were more injurious than others with this data. Now, all laborious. Did we have success? Huge success. We had our first 26% reduction in concussion only a few years in. Helmets, the performance of helmets tested in the lab to see if it can withstand those concussions were 9 times X since when we started testing the helmets. So it accelerated 9 times the improvement from when we started to test. And the wins kept coming. We started with, rules changes from our game. Lowering the head was one of our first rule changes. That data went to the competition committee so they could use it. Now, talk about resistance. Leverage your wins. Build the confidence. People want to achieve like, your moonshot. Do the quick wins first and start to gain trust especially when you're innovating, because then you'll start to build the trust on the quick wins to ask for more. So what do I mean by that? We were at GE, and GE was a long partner of ours in the health space. We did a head health initiative with them to better understand head injuries, but to have concussion devices, to have really equipment and devices to better help us on sideline to diagnose concussion. So we went to GE and they were showing us, which was fabulous. They were showing us one of their laboratories. And in their laboratory, they had what they called the digital twin of turbine engines. So it was predictive analytics of their engines, right? To predict failure because they would take energy from those engines and sell it. So it's a revenue source for them as well. So we were leaving that meeting. It was a head engineer, my partner slash boss at that time, and myself. And when we were leaving, it's like everybody's head was spinning, you could tell. And it's like, well, what if we could create a digital twin of NFL players? We have all the data. We have more data than you can imagine because of video. And so it was like, okay, well, let's see if we can put a strategy around this. What we needed at that point in time was a technology partner. So talk about resistance. It's like, okay, how are we going to digitize the movement of a player, get all of this data associated with the player? You want to talk about resistance? But what are the benefits? What are the benefits to the game? What are the benefits? Look at the benefits that we've already had, and we could have even more so. And so what we had done was first we needed a technology partner because all of the data, when I tell you it was laborious, was in Excel sheets. I've seen that before. So we built this rich data set that we were leveraging and using. But what if we could scale? So we're not just reviewing all concussions, but reviewing all injuries via data. So we went on this massive roadshow where, I could pinch myself, whether it was Google, AWS, Microsoft, you name it, MIT. We went to the leading academic institutions that were on the forefront of technologies like computer vision, pose estimation, all of these sophisticated that are now AI applications. But they were at latency at that point in time. But asking them to pressure test our vision. What if we could create a digital athlete, which is a digital representation of every single player? So we can use that data to predict and prevent injuries, not just in game, but they spend a heck of a lot more time in practice. And we knew that we have all of the data in a video. And so, how do we distill down the data in the video for better, richer learnings, which we had not done yet? Everything was done by manual eye. So, to fast forward, once we selected AWS, we had to rebuild out our expert ecosystem to include biomechanical engineers that understood football's demands on the body, right? We needed data scientists, data engineers to build out the infrastructure and the models. And then, so important were the athlete management teams, being the sports science teams that are working with the athletes at the club. They know the athletes, they know injuries, but it was the what if we can give you quicker, more accurate, more, deeper insights into injuries. And we were able to benchmark one running back across all running backs across the league. They never had that before. So here is going back to your point, here's resistance. We got the best in class leaders. We got the best in class, and this is credit to the NFL, the best in class in each discipline that we needed. And then it went back to my roots. If I can connect authentically on our mission, build trust on that team, the quick wins kept coming. And the quick wins were, at first we had that, video review that I was saying that
Mhm.
counting head impacts. We crowdsourced two algorithms that would identify the helmet and track it via video. And then we had coordinates in shoulder pads, sophisticated, but we had coordinates in the shoulder pads, which was a device. And that would give us the coordinates of that player on field. So we knew the number of impacts, two algorithms tied together. We crowdsourced it globally. And there was then one calculation, it was machine learning at that point in time, but code that could then identify every impact in near real time. And so the league, when you open, went from like league of denial to this. We were actively counting, documenting, and giving head impacts to all of those coaches only, right? So they can better manage their athletes. That's
Mhm.
transformation. Was there resistance? Yes. But with quick wins and building out a team with experts, right, that can redefine the need and resettle, whether it was data privacy, whether it's like you have to be open, you have to be transparent, but no one individual can do all of that alone.
Right.
Was building the right team. So those that were still resistant to it, right? You'll still have those naysayers, but you have to build your allies. And when the work starts to prove itself, leverage those quick wins to continue to keep driving.
Hmm.
NFL was down to, and I can explain a little bit more about the benefits of the digital athlete because it's absolutely brilliant. Um, Credit to the massive teams that we brought together, especially our biomechanical engineers in AWS. But concussions reached historic lows this past year. And that took, nearly a decade to get to. But that's success. And I know the league, I'm no longer there, but they're not done yet. Health and safety is one of their top priorities. And so when I was leaving, it was like so heartfelt, but it was a remarkable journey for me personally, but it is absolutely remarkable what the league had done on a global basis to better understand injuries, but really make an impact for our players, but to lead the way for many other sports and individuals to follow.
Jenny, that's so powerful. Everything you've just shared can be applied in any workplace. This idea of having a vision of what it can be like, and then recognizing how, what can we do to build the team that's going to make this happen, and then figuring out what represents quick wins for us in
Right,
order to build that buy-in and lower resistance. Because you're right, the quicker you can build allies, then you've got this momentum and this force
right.
working in your favor that can, help you get over the finish line with what you need, even if you still have one or two or whatever number of people that are still questioning and wondering, is this going to work or not? You've already had the, and just everything you mentioned, each of us can think about how could we apply those same ideas to the work we're doing.
And
Time
Meredith,
has flown by, Jenny.
this
With
is where I've like love advising because many people
yeah.
think, okay, like me as a CFO, how in the world would I lead an innovation platform? But it really is if you connect authentically and you understand who you need to bring together that expert ecosystem, right, to help you to solve for, builds the trust. And a lot of that trust is the data and the quick wins. But
Hmm.
it's trust in one another when you build the team right. And then it's trust in the data because the data is going to give you quick wins. And to my story, like you have to leverage those quick wins to continue to grow. And it's very much for me that connect, trust, and grow that people can apply. I mean, they can put that into their wheelhouse and really apply because no one person, and look, I was not a biomechanical engineer. I would get into meetings like, wow, this is over my head. But I leveraged my strengths. It didn't matter if I was different. I used that as like a power because I could
Hmm.
ask questions that was like, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I love your model. It's so simple and easy to understand. Connect, trust, grow. It's wonderful. So, as we wrap up, I would love for you to share how can people connect with you, learn more about your work, get more of Jenny, because you have so much wisdom and expertise that we just barely scratched the surface of today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time, Meredith, as well. You're so kind. I do have a website, jenniferlangtoninc.com. And so all information about either my advisory services or my speaking engagements are there. My email is also there as well. But for anybody looking to really I'd say embrace innovation, inspire change, because change is hard and people can't like that. That is the strength of my CTG model, is to inspire change and to continuously grow. It's like I can help you put a plan together, a strategic plan, so that you can apply, this same model that has worked for me personally and professionally in my life. And it has honestly been the engine behind every breakthrough that I've achieved personally and professionally. And I want to help others to do the same.
That's great. I love that you're taking everything you've acquired and learned over the years and all your various experiences and now sharing that on a broader scale to have even greater impact. So thank you. Thank you for being with me today. And thank you for the work you're doing today to have that kind of positive impact on so many people, Jenny.
Thank you, Meredith. You're so kind.
Thanks for tuning in to my podcast. Now head over to growstrongleaders.com and check out the powerful tools we've created to help leaders strengthen their character and communication skills. Until next time, I'm Meredith Bell.